My name is Will Potter, and I've been really nervous about giving this talk. I never get nervous giving talks anymore, in part because I just really respect everything that everyone here has been doing with Let Live and so many of the people and faces I haven't seen in a long time, what this conference is all about. And so I've was thinking about, trying to talk about community, and I was on a run, and for some reason I started thinking about church and growing up like a little while in Catholic school. So I'm going to talk about church. So before, I just had this image of Hooten running on with like a giant cane and pulling me away from the conference attendees, but I think hopefully it'll make some sense. But as a background, I went to Catholic school in first grade and kind of grew up in the Catholic Church. And then after first grade, the church and I didn't get along so well, and that didn't last. And so in Catholic Church, you have to do your confirmation, which is like, as an adult choosing to go into the church and be confirmed, and I refused to do that, and it was this huge drama with the family and it was falling out and all this stuff. But anyway, so I remember being really young though, and in hindsight, even after all that fallout, I really took away a couple important lessons, or at least I did now, looking back on it and trying to think about community and community building, and especially in response to state repression. So, for anybody recording, or if there's any law enforcement recording, if you can send a copy to my grandma, she'd be so happy with me talking about church right now after all these years. But really the first thing I wanted to talk about was, when I was young, I had asthma really, really, really bad. Hospitalized all the time. It was just a total mess. And so I remember going to church, and my grandma would take me up to Father Beaumont, and we're all French too. And Father Beaumont, would bless me and pray over me every time. And I didn't like it in large part because Father Beaumont kind of smelled like mothballs. But the main reason I didn't like it because it didn't work. And so it's just setting up this false hope in me. And years later, what I learned, the only way to deal with my asthma, the only way to deal with a lot of things, is just to confront it head on, to make changes to your diet, make changes to your lifestyle, to exercise and push your limits even when it really, really hurts, and to push your personal comfort zones. So I guess on a really early stage, a lesson I learned from those experiences was kind of the nature of change, and even social change, is that you really have to get outside your comfort zones, and sometimes you just can't look to others for hope. You can't look to others to pray over you. You can't look to others to be the one leading you to change. Sometimes you just gotta fight. But in hindsight, if I go up to Father Beaumont now, I wouldn't be condemning him for what he tried to do, because I genuinely believe he did it in a loving way and in a caring way, and he truly was genuinely trying to help. But I wish he would have been a lot more helpful to me if he had the courage to say, look, this is how I'm approaching it, but there are other ways that you need to think about approaching it too. And I know that may be kind of a leap to talking about social change, but I think that's something we need to remember also. There are a lot of people here that are going to be approaching things in a lot of different ways, in types of activism, and what they're advocating for in their activism. And I think it's all going to have a place in this conference and after the conference. And just because you feel very strongly in your method of change and of healing and of offering to help others, that doesn't mean it's the only method. And it doesn't mean you have a monopoly on that. So in short, I guess the message, or the first message I wanted to remind myself after thinking about all this was, we all have to have a time, as Chad and Tim and everybody else said, of getting up and speaking and sharing what we have, because we're all experts in some things or many things, but then there's also a time for all of us to listen and to shut up and learn, including all the speakers here tonight. And by the same token, there's a time for all of us to be up in the pulpit, and then there's a time for all of us to be sitting in the pews. The second lesson that I've been thinking about in relation to all this was, in many ways, the more important one. I was talking to a really good friend of mine late last night and this morning about community building and what we should be trying to do right now, and how we should be trying to think about building community in the face of what's going on with the things government and corporations are trying to do, and how to fight back against it, and just how everything is really difficult, or it seems really difficult right now. And this is something I never thought of with the church until much later in talking to a professor of mine. And one of the earliest memories I have of the Catholic Church is that during the Mass, the priest would at some point, I don't know if this happens in other churches or not, but everyone I've talked to in Catholic Church had to do this. The priest kind of stops the Mass, and you turn to everyone around you, or the people immediately around you, and you give them a hug, or you introduce yourself and shake hands, you say who you are, and then you say, in our church, you said, "Peace be with you." And I thought we should do that. Just because I think the key message with all of that was you can't build a community when you don't even know each other. And so you can't be anonymous here. You have to get to know each other. And we're going to force you to stop. Say hello to the people that you're sitting next to facing forward when you should be facing to every side, and remembering this isn't like a one-way hierarchical thing. You've got to get to know each other. So you don't have to say "peace be with you," but you can say, animal liberation, or smash the stand, or whatever you want to choose. But everybody turn to each other and introduce yourselves. Now I feel like I've opened all this up and I get to crash the party time. So, I mean, it's not hard, right? It seems like one of those just completely obvious things that we never do in these conferences and workshops, of just trying to get to know the people around you. But I mean, what I was thinking about with the church is it really didn't stop there, because I remember we moved around a lot growing up. Whenever you go to a new church, I remember one of the first things is that the priest would pull up new members to the congregation, embarrass the hell out of them, have them at the front and say, "Here's so-and-so, and this is their family, and they just moved here from Texas, and we just wanted to introduce them." So it was terrifying, and we moved a lot, so we had to do this a lot. But the effect it had, it says, we care that you're here. We care that you're new. And we're not going to let you just kind of be anonymous in the crowd and forget that you're here. I mean, we value you being here, and we want to make you know that we value you. I think that's something we need to do a lot more in activist circles. And you're going to hear a lot more about it this weekend and at the last Uplift. There can be this kind of cliques that form, and when you're new, it's really hard to break into a lot of these circles and to introduce yourself. And especially with all this stuff going on with some of these arrests, it's easy for activists to kind of turn in a new face and wonder, what they're all about. Can I really be friends with them? That kind of thing. But it also had the effect of, once you get to know each other, you take it a step further. And so I remember, whenever people were sick in the church growing up, my grandma would, or somebody in our family, make them a lasagna. If you had a death in the family, they'd carry food over, or they'd run errands, or do your laundry. And it was just a really simple thing to say, hey, we're not going to force ourselves on you, but you're going through a lot of tough stuff right now, and we're going to be there for you. And that's a really simplistic analogy, but we've got a lot of really complicated and tough things going on right now in the animal rights and environmental movements, that some people are sick in a lot of different ways, and we need to be there for them. So that means if somebody gets arrested, they need to know that there are going to be people taking care of their animals, watering their plants, organizing benefit shows, doing press releases, doing all this outreach. They need to know that if they're facing burnout, or if any of us are facing burnout and just completely fed up or depressed or tired or exhausted or just frustrated, that there are going to be other people that notice that and care and can kind of help you by just hanging out or offering to help, or do whatever you have to do to keep people in and not let them just kind of burn out into oblivion, which, I mean, if you guys have been around even for a year or two, I'm sure you've seen happen to people. So, to kind of try to bring it all back to this week, what's going on this weekend, it's a really difficult time for the animal rights environmental movements for, I think, a couple of reasons. One is because the issues that these movements work on and that we all work on are facing unprecedented levels of attention. I mean, everybody's going green. I mean, everybody seems to be interested in vegetarian, healthy, or whatever they want to call it, is definitely being mainstreamed. Even the last couple of years. I mean, you can go to parts of the country that I never thought you would be able to get soy milk and vegan ice cream. And I think that says a lot about how things are shifting. At the same time, it's being accompanied by an unprecedented crackdown on the animal rights and environmental movements that other movements have experienced throughout history, throughout US and world history, but are fairly new in the last 10, 20 years to the animal rights and environmental movements. So those are kind of difficult things to weigh against each other. And I think it's really going to be a turning point. And it's going to be a turning point that's determined by how we build community and how we respond to this. And I think, just to wrap everything up, there's no reason that what I think I learned from church, or now I learned in hindsight, needs to be confined to any church or to any religion. I mean, some of you here might have been born into a church, but your values that you're here tonight because of your choosing. You're choosing to be here. It's not because your parents are dragging you. It's not because a priest is forcing you to the front of the room. You're choosing to be here because you care very deeply and passionately about something. And we can build that kind of a community every place we go. We can introduce ourselves, we can welcome new folks and help them along. We can be support for people that need it. We can do outreach and organize and support our prisoners. We don't have to have churches or anything like them to do things like that. I mean, we have the Let Live conference, we have Food Fight and Herbivore and the Red and Black, and all the things that are in your communities and collective meetings and punk rock shows. And the two things that I think, if the Catholic Church had had them, I might have stuck around all these years, and that's vegan ice cream and karaoke. So, in light of that, peace be with you. Thank you.